Good morning, world. And how I'm here today, I don't have my jacket because I'm celebrating the town of Morrisville being an American city as we presented yesterday and the finals will be announced. But I'm Steve Rao this evening. I'm Steve Rao, the host of World Edition. And on World Edition Pod TV, we bring you great news from around the world, talk about innovation and what we can do to build back better in a COVID economy, post-COVID economy. Today, I want to talk about innovation. My monologue is very, very exciting news from the United States Senate. The title of my monologue is An Investment with a Big Return. An expansive bill has passed the United States Senate with, yes, bipartisan support, the American Innovation and Competitiveness Act. This legislation, which is sponsored by Senator Schumer and Young, is basically bolstering our competitive edge in science, innovation, and technology, presenting $200 billion of investments in innovation for our nation. It passed 68 to 32 and now heads to the United States House. This is a very, very significant bill. $100 billion would actually go to create a directorate of national science innovation. This individual would be responsible for increasing and funneling investments into artificial intelligence, semiconductors, robotics, and high-performance computing. Congressman Ro Khanna from California, a pioneer of innovation as he represents much of the Silicon Valley, called it the Frontier Act. But Senator Schumer said that sounded too much like wagons, so they changed the name to the Innovation and Competitiveness Act. Well, 75% of computer chips and semiconductors are manufactured in Asia. So it would actually bolster the production of semiconductors. As I close out my monologue and we talk about the significant move in innovation and how we can compete with nations like China, as President Biden is on his way to England, and the technological advantages of China have many in the allied world worried. I think we have to look at whether these investments are worth what we put in and the return that they bring. I am here to argue that they absolutely do. In the 1950s and 60s, the United States of America spent approximately 3% of our GDP. Today, we spend 0.7% of our GDP on science and innovation. Think of the innovations that came from those investments: airplanes, jets, the internet, life-saving drugs for diseases like cancer and heart disease, and when it's all said and done, new jobs. Now, President Biden is doing this with his American Jobs Act, promising new jobs and innovation. However, it is hard to do that if you only spend today 0.7% of the GDP. Much of this is due to the skepticism of the American people, largely the conservative movement, which questions large government, saying the government is inefficient, or as the late President Ronald Reagan said, government is the problem, not the solution. Well, I completely disagree with the late President Reagan, may he rest in peace, because I believe that the aggressive investments in science and innovation are exactly what we need to make America competitive. And if you look at here home in North Carolina or wherever we're watching, remember that these regions of the world are looking for innovation hubs, looking for the investments in these critical areas to create the jobs of the new economy. It's a competitive economy, one in which we thrive to succeed. And we hope we will do so in North Carolina. But I'm sure wherever you're watching in the world, we want to be a part of this exciting discussion. On to the House and then to the President for signature, the Innovation and Competitiveness Act of the United States of America, the largest investment in innovation in over a century. Thank you.
How's it going there? Great comments that you were making and everything. And definitely, it's all about leadership. It's all about things along that line. So definitely we got to have great leadership in our society and great leadership in the community. So glad to be here joining you. We'll see if Mr. Palveda, our boss, joins us as well. We know that we got Brandon Heldon on the engineering, so we definitely appreciate him doing that for us today. And of course, there are a number of other things that are going on in the world, including the fact that we had some, sad news in the world of sports, not sad news in the world of anything that's major, but we were rooting for the Hurricanes, and of course, the Hurricanes did not win, so they went out 4-1. So maybe Nicholas is over there, Mr. Valveda, celebrating since he's got some of those Tampa roots as well. So he might be celebrating, and maybe that's where he's at. But we've definitely got a number of things going on in our community, even in sports and everything else. So we're going to see if Sasha joins us or if anybody else joins us as well. But definitely a lot of things are going on in society. I know that I was even watching about how things are going over there in the Latin American part and everything along those lines, because we do know that folks were over there checking out the Latin American community as well. So definitely we saw that. I think Kamala told the folks from Guatemala not to show up at all, told them not to show up because there was no need for them to show up at all and not try to come across the border. And I was actually watching a news story where they were talking about what's going on there. And they actually had an interview with somebody that was a former drug runner and all of that. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, because it was sounding like she was trying to be a hardliner in terms of telling folks not to come across the border and all of that when she was over there speaking about the folks over in Guatemala. And I'm sure that a lot of folks are also paying attention to the Mexican border and a number of our other borders as well. So don't know your thoughts on that, or even Sasha's thoughts on immigration and whether definitely Kamala was trying to be a hardliner, because definitely, we've not seen that, but it did seem like she was trying to be a hardliner in my mind. So what are your thoughts about immigration and what's going on in that community?
Well, go ahead, Sasha.
No, no, you go ahead.
No. Well, I want to, I always, today we're talking a little about innovation. So from a legal and skilled immigration, I think there's a connection between immigration. But this is a tough issue for the vice president. I think she's been put in sort of a no-win situation in terms of, being a proponent for immigration, even illegal immigration, and now dealing with the situation. But I do think that she has to take somewhat of a hard line. We have laws in America, and I think that there's a lot of people coming to the border and leading these separation issues and things like that. So something simply has to be done. I know she's probably not happy that she has to deal with, kind of being the hardliner. But Sasha, what are your thoughts?
It's a very difficult issue any way you look at it, because obviously U.S. needs immigration, because it needs, of course, it's a dream. In a dream world, U.S. would get all skilled workers, and they would definitely benefit society. But in reality, it's not happening. Actually, skilled workers have less and less reasons to come to live in U.S. It's not a very friendly place, and a very complicated place, a dangerous place. So you have to deal with what you have to deal with, unskilled people. But if you look at it a little bit further down the line, all those unskilled people, as long as they are willing to work, in 2 3 years, they will acquire some skills, even if they don't want it, but they will. So in the same people who are unskilled workers today, they will be skilled workers for sure in 5 years. And then on, they will be paying taxes, they will be working, and everything will be great. So should you accept these people? Of course you should, because if nothing else is available, then just get that and be happy with this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a tough situation, and I think that we got protests in Raleigh today about separation of families. Some of the newspapers and news agencies have called me about putting together, some clips about the skilled immigration, and the challenge is how do we bring this, to fruition, to come up with a solution. But Sasha, today we're talking about a fascinating bill on the floor of the U.S. Senate that passed, believe it or not, Sasha, with bipartisan support. I'm sorry I'm not wearing my jacket today. I'm wearing my USA hat because Morrisville is in the finals for All America City. And so I'm excited. I'm wearing my shirt. Hopefully we'll be accepting the award tonight. But the bottom line is this: $200 billion investment in science and technology and innovation. $100 billion would go into creating a directorate at the National Science Foundation, which and this $100 million would be invested into artificial intelligence, robotics, high performance computing, all of these things, semiconductors. And I never realized that only 75% of semiconductors are manufactured in Asia. So it's gone down quite a bit. And so this is an attempt by the Congress to actually uplift innovation. And I want to get your thoughts about that, because today in America, we spend 0.7% of our GDP. We used to spend 3% of our GDP. But the Republicans often say federal government is bad. Federal government is bad. When I'm looking at Canada, you guys provide health insurance for everybody. Many countries are providing government services. And I disagree with late President Reagan, who said government is the problem, not the solution. I think government can be the solution if it's done the right way. What are your thoughts?
First of all, about healthcare in Canada, it is provided by provinces.
Provinces.
The provinces, actually not federal government. The provinces are providing by collecting taxes. And in fact, those taxes are providing for paying because it's very expensive medical care anywhere in Canada, same as US or so on, because all the doctors have to be paid, all the medical facilities have to be built up, and so on. So this is just about enough to have reasonably good health care. Some people complain that the access sometimes is restricted. So if you want to go at, say, at 1 p.m. do the, for example, X-rays, or better even, for example, let's.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. You want to do the forgot that word.
Oh, well, we're talking about, I'll make it easy for you. So, what I was asking was today, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the American and Science Innovation Act. The funny thing is that Congressman Ro Khanna called it the Frontier Act, and Senator Schumer said it sounded too much like wagons, and so they wanted to change the name. But it's basically $200 billion of investment in science and innovation, much of it in robotics, artificial intelligence, and I think semiconductors. And Mark, don't you think this is important? I mean, in terms of just competing for the jobs in the new economy. And there was another New York Times article that talked about how all these different regions of the world are looking to be innovation hubs. And I was a bit concerned that North Carolina wasn't mentioned. They mentioned Boston, they mentioned California, they mentioned Northern Virginia, they mentioned in Texas. And of course, people are going to Canada for innovation. So, but what are your thoughts about, that was my question to Sasha is, and he has some great points. I made the mistake of assuming that the federal government pays for insurance in Canada. But the point I was trying to make is that federal government, if done right, works. And when we invested 3% of our GDP, we created the internet, airplanes, life-saving drugs for heart disease and cancer, electricity to rural areas, modernized our airports. But today in America, we only spend 7%. And we're not making those kinds of investments. And, Sasha, you talk a lot, world affairs a lot. China's kicking our butt in the U.S. on this. They're spending 5% of their GDP. So what are your thoughts about, is it too late for America to catch up, or do you think it's a good thing that we're doing and we can get back to even keel with China and other parts of the world? Mark?
I think
go ahead, Sasha.
Sorry, I think it's too little too late, and I'll explain why. You see, when you take a country as China, there is a government, and there is not opposition whatsoever, not even 1%, simply zero opposition. So whatever the central government decides and trying to do, it will be done 100%. It could be maybe a little bit later, it could be delay, but it will be done. Nobody has any doubts whatsoever. In US, in this so divided country with so divided government, particularly Democrats, okay, technically, in my opinion, they're in power, but either they have to learn how to use this power, they have to practice it, they have to do something with that power, because in a 1 year time they will not have the power. So whenever you are talking about the government decisions and trying to implement them, by the time that you will put it all together and ready to implement, oh, by the way, you lost power, out. So another party will try to do something with that, and then yet another 2 years and something else will happen. So in this environment, to tell the truth, I'm not overly optimistic on all these wonderful initiatives and budgets and all that stuff.
Sasha, thank you, and I think it hopefully it's not too late, but we've at least the only positive thing is the president is leading these efforts. Mark, what are your thoughts about it from someone sitting in Durham, a hotbed of innovation, Duke University, not too far from Chapel Hill? We've got a lot of immigrants coming in here, driving this innovation. But what do you think about this call for the country to come together and make these investments in science and innovation and technology?
I mean, we definitely need to have more investment in science and innovation. I'm a big proponent of what they call STEAM programs, and STEAM also includes the arts as well. So it's not just science, technology, engineering, and math, but also you add the artistic variation as well, and that's when it becomes STEAM. But definitely, I'm a big fan of those kind of programs. I've seen a lot of great innovations. I know that my friend Stephanie Esby does one out of Atlanta, Georgia. There's some folks that are even doing it here in North Carolina, like Jess Everhart and a number of others. So I definitely would like to see more of this kind of work done on a regular basis. So I definitely think that we need to see more and more kinds of conversations in that regard. Actually, one of the things you said actually surprised me, which was that you said that North Carolina was not really being included. And I've always thought of us as being definitely a leader in technology and a leader in entrepreneurship.
I'll find the link
Definitely
to
all
the
of that.
article. I mean, I'll find the link to the article and try to share it. But yeah, keep going, Mark. I'm going to try
I
to
was
find
going
it.
to say, yeah, because I mean, definitely Boston and Massachusetts have strong programs. Definitely, like you said, Texas, Northern Virginia, which is, of course, near the DC area, and, of course, even California, which is Silicon Valley. But I think that we've done really well as well also in technology. I am sometimes wondering if we're not running into problems, and it's a similar problem that we ran into in one of our artistic backgrounds and everything as well, because just like I've always thought of us as a leader in STEAM, I definitely still think of us that way. But I also remember we used to be a leader in films, and definitely one of the things that happened was that we kind of cut back on the tax credits and things of that nature. So I'm wondering if some of that similar kind of things might be hurting us in the technology front, meaning that we're not giving enough support to those technology companies that want to come in. But I mean, we do know that we've
Mark,
got a major one coming with
I'm gonna.
Apple, and of course we've got Google Fiber, and we've got another of other ones. But I do know that we missed out on some as well, and I was wondering if part of that might have been that our competitors were offering more in the sense of incentives and in the sense of other things that they could do to make their areas more attractive. And I think one of those might even been up in the Northeast sector, kind of like similar to Boston or something like that, that we lost one of those contracts that we were hoping to get. So definitely I would hope that that would be going on, that we would be having folks trying to give us the incentives in order to create even more businesses. Because, we've even got some things that in my mind have kind of stalled. They had the vision, and I think they still have the vision of being like a technology park. Research Triangle Park was a leader in that sense. And there's a town called Rocky Mount in northern North Carolina, and it was trying to start something similar called the Global Trans Park. But I don't know that it ever took off the way that the Research Triangle Park did. And I think part of that might be that enough of the money wasn't going into it. I think that they're now maybe on their second or third try and making that even more like the Research Triangle Park. But I know that you're more of a student of that than I am. So maybe you can tell me what you've been hearing about Global Trans Park. And I think there's one that's going to be more geared toward environmental stuff. It was going to be down there toward the south of us, like around Kinston and that area. But I don't know whether you're hearing enough of these Research Triangle Park models that are being used around the state and even around the Southeast. But I know that there's a model that is used. I'd even heard a friend of mine talking about that they thought that they may be seeing something similar in their part of South Carolina, and they live on the part of South Carolina that's right across our border. And they had actually heard that the Charlotte Panthers may be moving to their town, so they're already trying to figure out innovations and things that they can do to help encourage that happening. Now, that would be a major blow in my mind for the big city of Charlotte, and I don't know that it would ever happen, but they did speculate that they thought that definitely a practice facility may be moving there, and eventually they could even move the entire team. And Panthers do pride themselves on being the Carolina Panthers, meaning both North and South.
What city would in South Carolina?
South Carolina, right?
Well, real quickly, Nick, before we kick it back to Sasha, and we're going to continue this before we go into world affairs. But I will say that I'm going to close out my monologue with this whole idea of the geographic distribution of innovation, which I think is very important. But in my monologue, I will mention, but just to throw out some ideas, San Francisco and Boston really been the two areas in the U.S., but they mentioned Rochester, Pittsburgh, Texas, but there's no mention of North Carolina. I do know that I'm trying to bring him in as a guest for the show, Scott Levitan, who's the CEO of our Research Triangle Park. And for those of you listening around the world, right here in North Carolina, we have a research park. Many, many years ago, 50 years ago, it was just woods, and they had the idea of creating this environment where you would have a connection between universities and employers. And so, the rest is history. IBM, Cisco, SAS, GlaxoSmithKline, thousands of pharmaceutical companies. But there's a whole effort now to have living and have restaurants. And we've got this thing called Boxyard RTP. We've got a $1.5 billion project called The Hub, which is high-rise apartments. So this whole live, work, and play, which seems to be what people want, to have innovation districts. They want to be able to come and live and work and play in one place, right? So I think the Trans Park is the same thing, Mark. And Sasha, do you have research parks in Canada? Are there research parks in Canada?
We have some incubators. We have some areas which are predominantly high tech. Everywhere in Toronto, in Ottawa, in Vancouver, of course. Yeah, there are.
But Steve, and let's go back to the conversation we were having yesterday and everything. Isn't part of the problem with those innovation hubs the fact that oftentimes they are very much very pricey and things of that nature, and then that prices out some of the folks that might be of poorer economics and things along that line, and it creates even more of a gentrification kind of model, because definitely there is some great contrast between the rich and the poor there in Rocky Mount, and the same with even here in Durham and everything. Yeah, the Research Triangle Park is a great venue, but it's not that far away from McDougal Terrace, which is definitely in the hood and has had some problems with asbestos and other things, and it's also not that far away, some people would argue, with the even historical Kew Gardens and all of that. But definitely I do sometimes wonder about when these innovations happen, how it creates even more of a class divide. I mean, I'm even thinking about one of these, actually two, maybe three of these fancy, nice hotels. I mean, not hotels, but housing projects are actually right near mass transit, but also right near some of these high rises. So it means that some of these people, getting the bus to their various jobs from their poor neighborhoods, they get to see the fancy people living in the in what we would consider expensive, even though in New York prices and maybe even Toronto prices, they're not that expensive. But they're living in $1,500, $2,000 a month apartments and all of that. Now I know that that's nothing compared to what people pay in like New York City and San Francisco and some of those places, but the cost of living is also much higher there as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and I think this might be an interesting point for Sasha is, and my wife brought this up today in the morning as we were having a cup of coffee, is I'll give you an example of that exact point. And I think it really plays to this whole idea of not only having a conversation of the geographic distribution of innovation in America, but also spreading that innovation across all sectors of the economy. So here's an example, and Sasha, you might find this interesting. So Apple has announced a huge investment in our state, 3,000 jobs. It's going to be their next major Eastern hub of innovation. And what's already happening is housing prices are skyrocketing. or will skyrocket. And this is a real concern because as you grow innovation with these tech companies, the price goes up. So, and then people are going to be displaced, or they're going to be, neighborhoods will be torn up. And so I just want to get your thoughts on that. How do you balance innovation with just the basic person that needs, a place to live, food to feed the family, healthcare to keep themselves not from being sick, right?
I have difficult time to understand the concept of innovation where government, in fact, is in charge and it's doing something about that. If Apple decides to build up North Carolina, or they will probably build 10 scientific centers in each state, it's their decision, it's their money and their shareholders, and they can do whatever they want with their money. However, with the government, I'm very skeptical, and I'll tell you why. If you take the history of the civilized world, any anything from music composing to great paintings, you'll discover one interesting thing. No great work of art was created by man who was not hungry. You must be hungry, you must be curious, and you must be passionate. That combination could create innovations, great pieces of art, scientific discoveries, and everything else. So once you're trying to meddle into that and eliminate that, you will not have a genuine innovations. You will just have a bunch of high paying jobs. And again, in case of Apple, I have no problem with that. It's a company, private company, but not private, it's public company. But however, it has its management who decided to do certain things in certain way. With the government, I really don't see its role in innovation. All the great Silicon Valley's firms, they were not created by government. It was a great combination of scientific forces, financial forces, and others who were creating an ecosystem, and government cannot create that ecosystem. That's my opinion.
But Sasha, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say that Silicon Valley and definitely the Research Triangle Park, and I want to even say the one that he was talking about there in Boston and everything was a combination of government and private enterprise working together. So it was definitely, as I understood it, partially government funded. Am I mistaken in that belief, Steve? I think that there was a lot of government involvement in the creation of Research Triangle Park, and I'm pretty sure it was in the creation of that Boston business district as well. So, am I
Yeah,
correct in that assessment?
it's a fascinating story, and I want to begin. There's a book called The Generosity of Spirit about the founding of the Research Triangle Park. And so, from a history perspective, and Mark, you might find this interesting. There was a governor in North Carolina named Luther Hodges, who was a famous governor. He was actually a mentor to Terry Sanford, who went on to be a mentor to Jim Hunt. So they're very famous governors. And there was a guy named Archie Davis who was a banker, and he had this idea of they had this land, and he said, if we raise money and buy the land, we could create. We've got these universities here. What if we could connect research in the universities and use that as a way to bring in employers? Well, everyone thought Archie Davis was crazy, so he took a year off and he traveled across the state, and he raised millions and millions of dollars. And the mission statement of the RCP is still the same mission statement it was 100 years ago, to lift up the people of North Carolina. So this man traveled all across the state, and he says, this is your park. I don't care if you're working in the mills, working in the labs, if you're working in the banks, and that's what the Research Triangle. But it did require both public-private partnerships, public investments from the universities, private investment from endowments and companies that brought it together, which is what you see today. But you are going to have some government investment. Now, I agree with Sasha Starr, though. I think you just can't allow you can't. Well, I think that goes to Sasha's point. You can't just have the government bunch of dump money in and say we're going to have innovation. It doesn't
Well,
work here.
first of all, even this great project, what we just described, to me, it sounds more like a real estate venture than anything
Yes,
else.
that is it. It is. It
It
is.
is
It's real
nothing but it's real estate venture. So, if you want government to participate in that, I can't figure out is it intention to make a profit for government? I don't think so. I don't think the government is there to even think about profit. So it is in a way to gain the popularity of the ruling party, to say that they're participating in such and such project, and hopefully the next election, whether it's federal or state or whatever, they will do well in the election process. That's really all what it is. I'm not that naive to believe that the government has a great intentions to make lives of the people better or so on. Please give me a break.
But I think I think it can create jobs if done the right way. The question is creating those jobs and distributing them in such a way that people can get them. And I think that's the challenge. I think Sasha has really hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, it comes down to helping people. And no, for those of you on Facebook, they got scared I was wearing a Donald Trump hat. No, 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 no. This is a USA hat, and I really apologize if you think I'm wearing a Donald Trump hat. But that's what brought Trump um, into power. Was he said, "Look, you've got blighted cities, you've got rural areas of the country where people are out of work. You have people like Chris Cuomo and Fareed Zakaria coming on tweed suits on CNN, and people unable to pay the rent, and they can say, stay at home, have a lockdown, but how do you stay at home and have a lockdown if you got to feed a family?" And so this has created, in my opinion, two Americas, okay, two very divided countries, urban and rural, Sasha. That's what's happening in America. There is a cultural war going on, but it's also a war between urban and rural.
Well,
And they,
the concept of war is that one side will win eventually and the other side will lose. So if one party in a war, those who are perceived to be oppressed and those people who believe that there will be more equal opportunities for all or so on, they have to win the war in order to achieve that. If they will fail to win the war, they will not get anything. Actually, their condition will even worsen. So either you fight the war and win, or you fight the war and lose, or you don't fight at all and just accept whatever is there. That's just as simple as that.
Hey, but Sasha, this is two questions I've got, and one is for Steve, the other is for you, Sasha. For Steve, the first question, and I'll just throw them both out there simultaneously, and maybe Steve will answer the first one, and then you can take the second one. But Steve, you talk about the vast differences that are out there and all of that, and one of the things I'm wondering is, and yes, you can tell people to work from home and work in this hybrid environment and everything. But how many of these innovation jobs, because a lot of innovation jobs are jobs that you have to be in the office working in collaboration with your cohorts and all of that. So I'm wondering how many of these innovation jobs are actually truly hybrid jobs or truly at home. And doesn't that put a disadvantage at those that are in the poorer societies and all of that? So that's one of the things that I was curious about, because when I hear about a lot of these technology jobs, you've got to have a certain kind of qualifications in order to do them. And, you got to go to school, and that actually becomes
well,
part
I
of the
think
divide
that's a good
as
point.
well,
It
is
all,
the education divide. And then the question I was going to ask Sasha, and then I did want to hear your response, Steve, is you talk about wars, and every war has a winner and a loser. But some wars, I wonder about that, because, I mean, is there a true winner or a loser in a cultural war? And we've heard of that term, cultural wars, and all of that. And definitely, sometimes I wonder if there is a true winner or loser in those environments. I mean, it's a war about whether your culture is better or somebody else's culture is better. And of course, there's different terms of cultural wars, but those wars don't always seem to have a winner that we can define in the way we can when we're talking about battles or even business wars. So I was just wondering your thoughts about those kind of like maybe more abstract wars, for lack of a better term.
go ahead. So
Go ahead. Go ahead, Steve.
you want me to answer the question about I guess the question about um, the types of jobs being created and whether it's going to be playing a disadvantage
Yeah,
to those that are, at home, who don't have internet access, who don't have
exactly.
the
And
money
don't
to
have the
go out.
educational access and don't
I think
have those kind of things.
my answer, real quick, and then I've got to take a call and I'll come run back. My answer to that is that we had Scott Rawls here talking about the community college system. He spoke to the U.S. Senate. Remember, he talked about the community college being a ladder college. So what's happened though is that many of these new jobs, particularly in robotics, process automation, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, you don't have to go to college to get a degree. You can go get a training at a community college. You can get an internship or an apprenticeship. You can get your skills at a much more affordable rate and get a job in the economy, number one. Number two, tomorrow morning I'm attending a presentation by the governor's Secretary of Technology on the amount of money that we're getting for broadband investment. So you can't have someone work if they don't have internet. If they don't have a car and they can't commute to work, transit and rapid transit and having affordable housing, Mark, there's a connection between that and innovation. Because then people could walk to the store, walk to get food, go to home, work, and not even leave their house. I'm finding this myself. The longer and longer this pandemic has gone on, the more and more used to I'm getting working from home. It's a really, really weird feeling. I'm driving in the car less. I'm doing less. And I was actually thinking about Sasha Starr the other day because lately I've been having some very good business meetings and I've been doing them from home on Zoom. And when I do meet people, I feel like I'm having better meetings because we're both better prepared and you cut to the chase, right? So time is more efficient. So Sasha's been saying this all along. We should do Zoom for business meetings, but so I hope that answers your question. I think it's community colleges level the playing field, making sure that innovation hubs aren't just created in urban areas, but they're also created in rural areas as well, right? Sasha?
Well, I'm even more convinced that there is absolutely no need whatsoever for face-to-face meetings because this is primarily leads to corruption and to some secret deals whenever nothing is recorded, nothing can be verified or anything. So there is no need for that. But there is a need to upgrade and increase the technical knowledge of people who are conducting meetings on Zoom to be able to make great presentations, to provide all the possible, whatever it might be, slides or just any material which augment your presentation. And you can do on Zoom something that may not even be possible to do in face-to-face meetings, such as electronic presentations are concerned or so on. So basically, there is no need whatsoever for private meeting. Everything what you would like to articulate, what you would like to maybe to sell something, and if other side needs whatever you are trying to sell, there is always you can negotiate right on Zoom that we can deliver so many products in so much time. Would that be acceptable to you? The other side would say, well, no, it's not really acceptable. We need much more units. All that could be done on Zoom. There is no need for face-to-face meetings. Period. Full stop. Period.
No need for face-to-face meetings. I've actually
No
heard
need
that,
at all.
and I've
No
even
need.
heard people talking about like air meets and things of that nature, where they've been having meetings, which actually gives you the pleasure of being in a room and almost seeming like you're in a true room and all of that, whether it's air meet or
Wait,
whether
wait.
it's
If you
Wova or a
represent,
number of other
hold
platforms.
on, wait. If you represent yourself, that's a different story. You can do whatever you want. You can travel around the world in the next 36 hours, or you can do basically anything. I'm talking about organization. If you represent organizations, there is no way you need a private face-to-face meeting. That's my point of view.
No, and I was agreeing with you. I'm just saying that there are other platforms that even make it more convenient to do that kind of meeting, whether it's, like I said, AirMeet or Wova or some of these other platforms that are out there now that allow you to seem like you're in the meeting, or you can even pretend like you're in the meeting at a beach and all of that. So there's these great platforms. Now, some of these are even like paid platforms, unlike StreamYard, which we use here and everything. But definitely there are these great platforms that allow you to have powerful meetings and all of that. So definitely, I was agreeing with you that seems that the face-to-face meeting is becoming a thing of less need. But one of the things that they say people have is a need to be around others. That not everybody, and there are of course folks that have historically been hermits and definitely not felt the need to have great companionship. But there is a historical need, and actually some people would even argue a scientific need for humans to be around like-minded people, and that's part of the reason that the office culture was created and all of that. So I'm wondering if we're getting away from that and we're going to have like these individual silos. And I'd even heard that when the Walkman first came out, that more and more people were thinking that it was going to be objective. A friend of mine used to call it a tool, and he was actually, I think he called himself a self-acclaimed socialist or communist, but he called it a tool of bourgeois subjectivity. And that was when the Walkman first came out, because he was seeing everybody kind of like in their own world and all of that. So it does seem like he may have been right. And what he was talking about was in the 80s. So we're developing like our individual cocoons. Even Steve was talking about how he enjoys being there with his family and everything. And then when he has the meetings, that's when he feels that he's at his best and everything. So I am wondering if we're creating a new version of society, because society is constantly changing. But whether it's the caveman or whether it was the various other societies, most of them have had a sense of community as part of their societal element. So I'm wondering if we're getting away from this and we'll just be individual villages of one, or maybe, villages of four, or maybe 5 or 6 if we're talking family.
My concern, well, my biggest concern is this, like, I want to get out and meet people because I do feed off the energy of others. But the problem we've had here, Sasha, and I don't know if you're having this in Canada, and then we're going to take a break and we're going to talk about some world affairs, but we've canceled a lot of in-person events. And so for someone like me that's in my careers in sales and business development, I go to conferences to speak and meet people and interact and engage. And sometimes I would collect 100 business cards in 2 weeks or 50 business cards. And then that would be my work of following up. Hey, I met you. We talked about this. And what's happened is it's frustrating. We're at almost 70% vaccination and still people are doing virtual events. So you're not getting the interaction that you need to both. So if I had a reason to go meet someone right now, I would, but I don't because there's no in-person meetings.
Okay, I'll try to answer that. Yeah, you're right. In certain situations, the feed of the people, especially if you are politician and a lot of is based on personal contacts and your skills of persuasion and so on. Okay, I agree with that. That in this situation, it might be possible or even essential to have face-to-face meetings. But such cases are not too many. In fact, I want to tell you, as organizational activity is concerned, like inside of organization, the you can call them Zoom meetings, although you can do them on several other platforms. The people in a lower level of corporate hierarchy, they are much better protected in a virtual environment meeting than in face-to-face, because it's very difficult to abuse them, including sexually or any other way, because everything is recorded, so they will be crazy enough to do something of that. Although in private meetings, as we know, everything is possible and a lot of things are happening. And so I really don't see, except certain situations as you described earlier, I really don't see at all. Not only that, I see the virtual meetings are much more productive than face-to-face because they're focused on the subject. What they have to make a decision about. So one side presents, for example, a product, if it's a selling situation. So they present the product and they describe it and they make all the videos about this product. And another side may say, yes, we are interested in products, we need so much delivered every month and so on. Or they will say at this time they are not interested in that. So To tell us the truth, so what private meeting could achieve as much as Zoom meeting? Zoom meeting would save you a lot of time and money. You will be up to the point. You will have the best of the world as a presentation of your ideas concerned, and I don't see any advantages in this situation, face-to-face meeting, except that
Yeah,
it will be
yeah.
corrupted situation.
And also healthcare. Like, I mean, the irony is for me, I mean, I'm a former athlete, but I'm in the best shape I've been in 30 years because I'm running and swimming and lifting weights. I'm not eating out as much because I'm not near restaurants. And I'm busy, keeping myself moving. So after the pandemic and working from home, I've dropped 10 pounds, and which is a good thing. Physically, I feel better than I felt in 20 years. But you know, I think it's interesting what's going on. The world really is changing, and we'll see what's going to happen. But let's pivot the conversation now a little bit to what we talked earlier. Uh, you know, uh, Biden is on his way to England. We talked about the three adversaries, or the three uh, areas where he's trying to bring unity among our allies: Russia, China, and the COVID pandemic. But the elephant in the room is immigration. Uh, what are
Hmm.
both your thoughts about Vice President Harris? We talked about it earlier, her trip to Mexico and Guatemala. And do you think, Mark and Sasha, she's doing the right thing by taking a little bit of a hardline stance on this immigration issue? I'll start with Sasha Starr. Sasha, what do you think the government policy of the United States should be towards these migrants that are coming into the border?
Well, I've already said earlier that U.S. needs immigration, even unskilled workers in but for sure in 5 years, they will acquire skills and they will be contributors to society. In 5 years, they definitely would know English. They would acquire experience in one of the either trades or agricultural environment or somewhere else. So they will be paying taxes way more than former president of the United States.
Mark, what are your thoughts
I
on this?
definitely think that we need to be welcoming more people into this area and everything. I mean, I don't want and I don't think anybody does, the criminal element of the drug runner element and things of that nature. But I think that the vast majority of those that are trying to come into this country are trying to come, one, either to escape their own economic hardships in the areas that they are at. And we're supposed to be the land of opportunity and all of that. And definitely a lot of times they're taking jobs that a lot of folks in our society don't want. I mean, we complain about, or not we, because I don't complain about it, but definitely some people complain about migrants, whether that's from Mexico or Guatemala, taking the restaurant job in the back kitchen, or taking the janitorial job, or taking some of these construction jobs and everything. And then those same people, if you ask them whether they want to get trained for that job and go for the job, they tell you how hard it is and how they don't want to do that work in the hot sun and all of that. But then they want to get mad at folks that are willing to make that sacrifice and do that work. So I don't know that you can have that dual edge kind of attitude and everything. So definitely, I have no problem with people coming in here and working these various jobs. And as Sasha just said, we're going to be doing more and more building. If we're talking about having a whole infrastructure, who do we think is going to be actually building these roads? I mean, we can just look at history and see that it's been immigrants that have created and developed a lot of these roads from a historical standpoint. I think about like the great boom in construction way back when that took some of the highways to China. Well, I mean, took some of the highways to California, but it was using Chinese workers. That's what I was trying to say. But definitely in other workers from other Oriental parts of the world and everything. And definitely it was also using some of the Latin American market also, because that was even at a time that people were coming across from Mexico and from some of the other countries that existed, because some of the countries haven't existed all that long, because some have a longer history than others. But definitely, I think that we should be encouraging immigrants to come across. I was actually surprised that Kamala did take that hard stance of telling people from Guatemala not to come, because, like I said, I don't think that would be my attitude. But I understand that she's trying to do it from a political standpoint as well, because as we know, political people campaign even when they're in office. So I know that she's probably also aware that Texas and some of the other border states will be in play at the next election. So I'm not surprised overly that she did it, because it was a political move in my mind.
Well, yeah, I think. Let me give you my answer. I think that there's a confusion between immigration and asylum. Number one,
Yeah.
so immigration has typically been like my parents. Sasha Starr is an immigrant from Russia to Canada. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sasha.
Yes,
But
correct.
okay,
Yeah.
and so there was a legal process. He left to secure a different life, maybe a better life. My parents did that in the 1960s, coming from India, but they went through the process. They went through the law, right? Then you have asylum, which typically has been given during periods of American history where, after the Holocaust, right, where you had people from all over the world, Jewish communities, coming in and having to get asylum in the United States because they could not live in societies where they were being tortured, murdered, persecuted, prosecuted. I think the problem and where I'm going with this is that the conversation that we're not having is that there is a reason why these people are leaving their countries and wanting to come to America. Yes, to get better opportunity, but when they're in Venezuela, they're getting tortured, they're getting killed, they're getting murdered, and they cannot go anywhere but the one country which is not far from where they are. And I don't think there's enough conversation being had as a foreign policy of the United States of America that just as hard as we are in Vladimir Putin and North Korea and the authoritarian government of China, why are we not challenging the governments of Venezuela, Guatemala, Honduras, Latin America, Central America? Because these dictators, quite frankly, I mean, in Venezuela, it is a nightmare. When I talk to people coming from Venezuela, North Carolina, it is an absolute nightmare that the people of Venezuela are living in a country that has been absolutely destroyed. Yes, it was a socialist country, and they're coming into America. So, didn't mean to get on my soapbox, but I think there's a foreign policy conversation to be had because if we just sit there and we're quiet, when is the last time you all have heard anything about the U.S. policy towards Venezuela? Have you heard President Biden talk about it? Because I haven't. Sasha, have you?
I've not heard
No.
him talk about it, and I would like to hear him talk about it. And I agree with you that a lot of these countries have horrible governments, and we definitely need to be working on ways to improve their government in their country so that they will want to stay where they are. And like I said, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, I've had the pleasure of talking to people from Guatemala, and well, that's been a while back, but definitely from Brazil and from Honduras and a number of other places. And I, like you, when I hear some of the stories that they tell me about the situations in their countries, I am oftentimes shocked at what they're going through, even though we know different governments and different government styles all treat their people differently. And that's just common sense based on those different government styles. But, and some of them are, like you said, dictators and all of that. But I think that I definitely don't want us to be the police of the world and try to dictate how people are governed, but we can figure out ways to help them at least have a stable economy. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation to be had. And the reason I brought it up is that might be a good conversation. Where I am working, folks, on. I've got a couple of inquiries and some guests for next week and the week after, political guests, leaders, but we should probably have someone come and talk about U.S. foreign policy towards Latin America. And, do we, I just want to throw it out there before we close out, but I think there's a foreign policy conversation, and I think Sasha Starr brings up a good point. We want to be able, and both of you, we want America to be a place where immigrants can come, right? But if too many people are, if we can make the lifestyle better in Venezuela or Mexico, maybe they wouldn't want to come.
Although maybe something to look at is okay, most Americans are upset at the immigration because it's illegal immigration. Why don't you make the rules easier for people to immigrate to the United States? Just easier, faster, more affordable. It's my first point. My second point is that while I was traveling in South America last year on a cruise, I've discovered that in Argentina and Buenos Aires, for example, there are a lot of Venezuelan people who they have kind of a low-paid jobs, like they're selling the juices on the streets or ice cream or some kind of very simple jobs, but they know the language. That's one big advantage for them, and it's very easy for them to get somewhat. Well, I didn't really inquire about it, but they don't have such strict understanding as are you there legally or you are illegally. I mean, if person is there, he is there legally. I mean, how else he could do it? So it's probably fairly easy in Latin America to cross the borders. They speak the same language, and they can very easy actually become part of a culture of whatever countries they came to work with. So maybe one of the solutions to look at is to see better developed countries like Argentina obviously is to get a little bit more. Although, mind you, Argentina has a lot of people who are out of work, and they have to take care of them and so on. So it's not really easy issue to deal with. Now, the final thing is you're talking about the policy of between the United States and Latin America. So now we're talking about meddling in affairs of each particular government with a very single-minded purpose is to restrict immigration from that particular country, whether Venezuela or Guatemala, to United States. I think this is. I mean, you should probably keep something on a facade and do something about it. But I think it's quite unrealistic that you can. What are you expecting to say, government of Venezuela? Well, wow, you're right. We are going to help you. We are going to restrict immigration of Venezuelan people to the United States. So what they're going to say to their people who want to immigrate out of Venezuela? Please don't go to the United States. Just go to Argentina instead. I just don't see that as a realistic something
Well, we're
happening.
gonna absolutely. Well, I think that's a good point. Or we could even have like work permits for them to come in at specific times and those kinds of things. So, well,
Maybe.
yeah, like they could come in for seasons to work, in farming and agriculture because we know that many of these immigrants from these Central American countries. Looks like Mark Lee has jumped off, so I'm gonna close out. He's got control of it. He's still there. So we're going to go ahead and close out. My closing monologue is to tie it back to immigration and, just sort of to talk real quickly about the bill that I proposed, talked about the Immigration Innovation Act, is providing a program to diversify the geography of American innovation. A small number of metropolitan areas now control innovation in the United States: Silicon Valley, Boston, New York, and Washington. They have all become expensive places to live, and that's a conversation we've had today. Housing capacity grows slowly, the cost of living comes up. We're really too big of a country in the United States to have innovation only concentrated on these four areas, so it's very important. And there's an author named Simon Johnson who wrote a book called Jumpstarting America. And in his book, he argues that R&D spending is both larger, more geographically diverse. And it works if you can spread it out across the country. And so some areas that he mentioned are Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Dallas, Tampa, Rochester, and Tucson, Arizona, that have schools, companies, and other infrastructure to become innovation hubs. And this bill actually includes $10 billion of a committed program that will finance R&D outside the usual locations. It's concerning that North Carolina was not mentioned, and I'm going to relay this to Governor Cooper, to Secretary of Commerce Michelle Sanders, Chris Chung, and John Loyak, and our team, because I do believe that North Carolina, in my opinion, needs to be a part of the Innovation Hub conversation. Obviously, maybe the New York Times missed us with Apple coming here. But on that note, it's been a really intriguing discussion. Hopefully, we'll be all. It's on the middle of the summer. We'll be taking some breaks, but we look forward to seeing each of you soon. And we'll be back tomorrow for another edition of World Edition on Pod TV. Thanks.